There you go. How are you doing today, Gustaw?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much, Reed. Thank
Yeah,
you for having me here.
absolutely. Yeah, and thank you for
How are
joining
you
today.
doing?
Doing pretty
My
well. I'm
pleasure.
happy it's Friday. Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm glad to have you on. I know I think it's nice to be able to occasionally have some talks that are around best practices and a bit of tips and tricks and things related to skills acquired over a very long career, to quote a movie in that case. So it's something that I'm certainly going to be looking forward to. And I know when it comes to design and anything else in the front end of Power BI, those are the things that I definitely like to specialize in as well. And we've had you on previously to do a video on that kind of interesting design of the matrix table, where you kind of built out a essentially a custom bar chart with those grand totals. I'll also be dropping that link for people tuning in the comments as well as he's going through some stuff. But Gustav's done some really cool things over the years for Enterprise DNA in terms of some of their contests that they continue to run for designs and other things like that. And you've often created some really cool looking reports and dashboards off of the data sets and things around there. So happy to have you back on again related to that. But I'd love for you to give a little bit of an introduction of yourself and kind of what you do to the channel.
Yeah, sure. So basically, currently I work as a head of business intelligence in Polish company named Enterium. And besides of that, I'm also an enterprise platform and DNA enterprise platform expert. So as you mentioned before, I've created several challenge reports through the platform DNA platform site. So I'm in pretty close relations with them, and I try to make some content related with the enterprise DNA. And besides of that, I have a experience of overall 4 years in terms of the development reports and analysis within the Excel and Power BI. And that's pretty much all in the very small, brief introduction.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And like I said, it's nice to always continually have chats with other people who have a focus on design and aesthetics. I know that's not something that everybody um, falls into as easily versus data modeling. There's a lot more modelers and DAX and I'd say Power Query experts out there than there are individuals who do the aesthetics, at least in the Power BI universe. So it's refreshing to always see some unique solutions and implementations, and certainly seeing the expansion of the art of possible related to some of those. So I'm excited to see what you'll be showing today.
Yeah, perfectly understand it. And I generally think that there is some specific way to visualize data, and if we can choose one way or another, one way could be more effective than the other one. So that's the main reason why I try to constantly develop some further techniques and solutions to be able to present data in a quite different way. But of course, I will try to do it in a more transparent and readable for end user. And I think it's the major factor and factor we would like to accomplish through our report development. So what I would like to present you, Reed, and all the audience today is some breakdown of specific techniques which will be related with the report layouts, structures, and specific DAX techniques, which serves the purpose of making our data more compelling, more appealing, and to be what is the most important, to be presented in a very effective way. So in terms
Perfect.
of the data visualizations and design in general, there are a few broad aspects that can be broken down by different sections. So for example, we have the report layouts, report structures, specific color schemes that we can choose. We have the specific choice of the visualizations and the methods of presenting the data. So it's a very broad topic, and I would like to pick some elements, some factors from each of these previously mentioned sections, and just give you the breakdown by within the different topics that I already mentioned. And to be perfectly clear with you, I would like to distinct some types of reports is very important, crucial distinction, because we may have the reports which are strictly presented in a business case model, and these types of reports should be, from my perspective, quite minimalistic and very effective, without unnecessary noise or elements. This is the one type of the reports, and on the other hand, we have the many UI-like application, web-based applications, and different kind of showcase and demo reports that can be looked a little bit different. They can include much more different sophisticated solutions, design solutions, or DAX, and can be just be a little bit more complicated in a good sense. So if we will be talking about the report structures and report solutions, I will be trying to pointing out that if it's something which should not or should be implemented in either the business case reports or in the showcase and demo reports. So first of all, as you can see here on a presentation, we are starting with the report layouts, and this is the thing that I can broke down to the two different categories. So the first category is the report layouts that are mainly prepared in the PowerPoint or different graphic programs. Just the PowerPoint is my way to go. I only use PowerPoint, and it's just sufficient for my needs. And it is the one way of creating the report layouts within the different external graphic programs. And on the other hand, we may have just the PBX file and generating some structures, the report structures within the PBX file itself, and using different objects and shapes and such, etc. And what you can see here is just the sample report layouts created mainly for the recent DNA enterprise challenges. Here is the 21 challenge, referring to the YouTube analysis. Here was the report layout creating for the 24th challenge that was teamed up with Brian Julius. And the 22, sorry, hotel revenue management, and some different very minimalistic layouts. So you can see there are different shapes, different structures, depending on the needs. And if we are just knowing our KPIs and our main topics of the analysis, we can just proceed with creating different types of layouts. Here is the basic sample 22 hotel revenue management report. It was the challenge report. So what I would like to see to show you here is the report structure. So breaking down to the basic sections of the report, you can see on the left side that we can have the extended bar with some specific navigation buttons, with the date selection, with different filters which are relevant in that context scenario, and some different functions like previous page, or just clearing all the settings and restoring to the default mode. So in that particular case, we can see that the report structure is structured in that way that we can have all the navigations and the specific filters, the key filters on the left side. On the top side, we can just have only the topic of the analysis. On the top, we also have the main KPIs which are relevant to the current analysis. And here is the main section which display the main charts that display the most important data and give us some ability to manipulate data by switching some different parameters and metrics, so we can dive more into the specific context. And on the right side, we can see we can have the additional charts which are just supplemental and gives a little bit of additional information. We can also have the navigation by left and right cursor icons that gives you the possibility to change the views within the same section. Here's another example of the report structure, also for the challenge from the enterprise DNA, and we can see that we also have all the key navigation buttons, supplemental buttons, and the date ranges filters on the left. And here is one main section with additional filters on the right side. And even if we are talking about such structure like here, we can just break it down by many different key elements. So for example, here we can see the navigation buttons, but the other quite effective way to displaying and placing those buttons is also the, for example, right upper corner. So there are two good ways from my perspective to presenting such, to setting such buttons, because we can place them in the left side in a more vertical way, or in the horizontal way in the upper right corner. That gives you the sense of moving your report from the left side to the right side. So even if we can see that the report structure like here, I can also point it out that there are some other methods to visualize our navigation in a very effective way. We also have the filters on the right side, and I would like to point it out that it's the list, which is not hidden, but some of the possible choices are visible. So it's the one thing that we would like to consider when we would like to put the filters, slicers that have the visible list of the categories of the items, or when we would like to put the, for example, drop-down list, because the typical drop-down list is a little bit more effective from the performance standpoint. But on the other hand, sometimes it might be required to give the end user the ability to just see the specific items which can be chosen. So there are different ways. Here's just the example.
Now, how do you handle it on those when because it's nice to be able to have them visible on the page, but the one downside that I've experienced a lot with slicers that need hierarchy is because it indents it, and it once you go like 3 or 4 levels deep, if you have a hierarchy slicer, and when the values are pretty wide, you end up having to make a very wide slicer or a really wide slicer pane, because otherwise, like, you get the fourth level down, you maybe only get 2 or 3 characters of the text before it starts to get cut off. So like
That's
my
right.
solution has either been I maybe include some slicers up somewhere in the top, so kind of a combination of a couple slicers built into the header for longer ones, or then there are times where I will occasionally defer to making either a pop out or using the native filter pane, because at least you can the user can expand it and then shrink it, so they can actually change the width dynamically, where it's a little bit harder to do that with fixed objects in the page. So I'm curious how you account sometimes where somebody has a hierarchical slicer with very long values you need to pick, like how you would design that on a page.
A great question. I think your methods are very great, and I'm on the same page as you. So first, my first way to display such slicers would be just placing them not on the right side where they will be cut very quickly, but on the upper side of the
Hmm.
page. So for example, instead of additional nodes here, I would like to place some meaningful slicers here, which would be much wider than presented here. And it will allow us to just, it would be the drop-down list. It wouldn't be the visible all the items, because it would take so much space of our report. So it would be drop-down list, but with the wider settings, and I will just click the icon of the drop-down list and just make some choices from the slicers. And the second options would be the pop-out menu, as you already said, but to be honest, I'm not the big fan of pop-out windows and menus, because it's always the additional clicks that we would have to make. So in some cases, it would be the great choice, and I can agree with 100% that pop-out windows gives you the flexibility to put many additional slicers which are not acquire additional space, and it's very effective in terms of spacing. However, it acquires additional steps. So for managerial and executive summary type of reports, I wouldn't like to put any such slicers on the page. So it
And I will
depending
say,
on the context.
and I will say the one thing that I've seen going back to, maybe you saw the tweet that myself and Kurt have done. Miguel Myers is helming a new vision and redesign, hopefully, of a lot of the visuals in Power BI, which includes some filter pane redesign, which hopefully can make it much more like what you see over on the right, like actually having slicers and other stuff, not just drop downs. But the the thing that I've seen as one of the visions, which would be amazing, is there could be a single visual, a slicer visual, that actually lets you use multiple slicers. So you could actually have one container that can have multiple hierarchical slicers in a single container, but also with the ability to expand and collapse it. So there would be an option to be able to basically just put a visual onto the right, it automatically could open and close, and also have multiple slicers all designed and contained within it. So basically, there could be, in theory, the vision is a single object added to the page, which is essentially a slicer pane object that lets you build it out entirely as you want to. But you don't have to use bookmarks. You don't have to group things together. You just design within a single visualization, so to speak, to build all that out. And if that comes to if that actually comes to reality, like that would be such an amazing addition, because how hard it is to build things like this sometimes, and then having a lot of unique objects on the page slows down the report. So there's a lot of considerations and performance that goes into like
Exactly.
where's the happy medium between it looks beautiful, but it also doesn't take 30 seconds to load. And
Exactly.
it's hard to do that sometimes.
So nothing left to just waiting for these cool all
Yes,
features that you
exactly.
already mentioned. But good to know, Reed. So in terms of the very general and very basic hints in terms of helping us, allowing us to make a little bit more effective designs, very simple 3 hints at the beginning of these presentations is either using eyedropper, so you can adjust your colors to the specific themes or logos of the company or something like that with the very precise matter. So I very frequently use eyedropper just to adjust the colors the way I would like to see them on the report page. The second thing will be the dragging object jointly, meaning that from one side it's very effective just to using the standard aligning of the specific single elements. However, on the second hand, I very frequently would like to place some specific elements or object on the report to the very detailed place, and sometimes it's just not available because of some drops and jumps of the specific elements when they are aligning to different elements. So my way to go is just to selecting a couple objects jointly, and it enables to move the visuals in the more fluent way. And the third element, the third method of object alignment would be just resizing using the general panel. It might be obvious for someone, but it's something that I very recently incorporated into my reports, and sometimes it's just the matter of single points or single pixels just to create the very compelling visual of our report. So from my perspective, everything should be aligned very just perfectly. So I use the standard general pane with the size to adjust point by point. In terms of the navigation and the buttons, a very, very crucial and very effective way that helps us to save a ton of money. No, not the money, but the time. But on the other hand, the time is money. Is the object grouping. So it would be my advice to everyone to just group the specific elements of our reports to the sections, and that allows us to save many time because we can just make visible or hidden the different sections, and it helps a lot. For example, when setting bookmarks, because I would, for example, switch for a second to the specific report. I would like to show you, basing on the recent challenge 23. It was prepared with the great Brian Julius from Enterprise DNA. So what I would like to see is the way of grouping specific elements. The very important thing here is this report consists of the overall dozens of elements of objects and visuals. However, it's still only the one report page, as you can see here. All the other ones are just the tooltips. So if you can switch, for example, to different views, to different bookmarks, different pages, it's all actually placed on physically one report page in PBX file, and it's the possible and a little bit more simple just by using the object grouping within the selection pane. Because as you can see here, these all sections, meaning the page 1 and the page 2 that you can see in the second click, is just the case of the grouping. So for example, here you can see that the page 2 is completely invisible at that moment, but I can just switch all the visuals from page 2 in just one click. So here I just make invisible all the sections, and you can see only the report structure, which is actually the background canvas, the standard, which is applied on a page. But all the other elements are hidden in that way and are grouped into 2 pages. There are also some additional within the many elements. However, it's not crucial from that perspective. So I only would like to see the page 1 and page 2, which are hidden or unhidden just by clicking one icon. And it's very effective in terms of adding additional elements, because for example, if I would like to add some elements, text box or whatever visual on the page number 1, I can drop this new visual within the page 1 group. So if I have some different bookmarks, it would not require additional actualizations within the bookmarks, because as the whole page is hidden at that moment, so every another element that I put within the page 1 is automatically hidden also, even if I add something. So it's very
So I have a good question from someone on this is versus I would say having a bookmark that would just simply take you to different pages that look like this. Why do you prefer to layer everything on one page versus say just having each page separate with a bookmark to navigate between them?
That's very valid question. So the first reason here is just to make it possible. So to be totally honest, I wanted just to test if I can put all the elements on one page, and if it's actually simple and if it's possible. So it's more like the case of the challenge itself. However, it's also the case of the slicer and filters on the page. And sometimes it's just a little bit more effective to put everything on one page than the different page. Of course, we have the slicers, synchronizations, and some different options. However, I just historically say that sometimes it's just a little bit more effective to put on one page given elements. However, it's not the rule. I just wanted to check if it's just available and possible to put all the information on one page. And we have also the constraints in terms of the number of report page within the challenge. So I would like to put everything on one page. And only one thing that I would like to also mention here is just, if you can see already, as I believe, the layout is changeable also within the pages. So it's I can say a little bit nuance, because here you can see that this is all one section here, which is the distribution percentage change in DLA score, etc. And it's just the one long layout for that visual. However, if we switch to different page, you can see that you have actually the different layouts, different structures, which derives from the PowerPoint layout, and not or the gradients and the bars here are not created within the Power BI itself, but the PowerPoint. So the trick here is to use the external image also as the object within the report. So for example, on a report page number 1, we have the standard canvas, which can be applied within the Power BI. However, in the moment we switch to the page 2, you can see that we actually put additional image on the side, which imitate very closely this previous page. However, with some subtle difference, like this section. Okay. So to sum up, we can also use different external images. Not always external images has to be applied as the standard canvas, background canvas. We can also use them as the external image and objects, and we can just extend to the whole view. So one way is just to use you can see here. So we have the second page too. I can just minimize it. and we can still have the one canvas here. However, the canvas from the page number 2 derives from the additional image which is in the background. And that's pretty much it about the 20 feature at that moment. It's something like the new trick, I can say.
So for the visual in the upper right, the what visual is that using? Upper right, with the one that has the equation with chi-square and all that?
Actually, this is the additional PNG or JPG file because it was not integrated directly with the Power BI, and it has to be the additional image just to present the data which was analyzed by Brian Julius. So it's not the visual itself. However, it was prepared with given visuals. However, I think the Brian Julius from Enterprise DNA should answer that question, to be honest, because he prepared 100% all the analytical part of this particular challenge, because we just have the team up forces with this challenge, and I created the structure of the report in terms of the front end and the design standpoint, and Brian prepared all the analytical stuff with the statistics and R and maybe Python and other analytical tools. So I think that Brian is the perfect person to describe with details all the specific visuals which are generated additionally.
I want to see him make that in Deneb or to articulate it, because like having a static image is cheating to me a little bit. So I would say I like the hard borders a lot, but it's obviously it would be really good to be able to have that to actually filter by anything else in the page or update with the data refresh. But I think that would be a great visual concept to build out in something like Deneb, for sure, as a custom visual.
Yeah, for sure. And it would be perfectly available and possible to do, if I know.
Oh yeah.
So looking at everything possible. what other people create, because I don't use Deneb so far. I just have to invest some time to develop some skills in that field. However, so far I didn't use it. So just saying about what I already saw in the social media from other people. So backing up to the presentation, object grouping, all right. Then we have the navigation buttons, and to be totally honest, we have plenty of different options how we can set up different buttons. Just to make you the feeling of using specific navigation buttons, I would like to open, for example, the Enterprise DNA 21 challenge, where you can see the whole bunch of different navigation methods, ranging from the choosing a different section or different report page. So everything is just popping out with different formatting fonts and different shapes that gives you the information that you already would like to pick something. So for example, here we can go to the geoanalysis, which is the step number 1 in terms of the navigation. And here we have the different types of buttons in a very simplistic way, because there are with no additional text at the very visible layer here. But as soon as you hover over the mouse over the specific button, you can see what is the destination of the specific filters. So we have, for example, the home page. Not everyone here button is active here, but it's not a problem. We have the home page. We have the previous page. For example, if you go to the drill through mode, a different section, you can always go back to the previous page and filter selection and LinkedIn mode. So here is the nice effect of hovering over, when you can see actually what is the destination, what's the meaning of given button. So we have the plenty of options how we can set it, how we can set the buttons. We can do it in a quite simplistic way, just using the specific modes of the buttons. However, I would like to show you the idea of using different layers and different elements to achieve similar results. So we can be very minimalistic and very time sparing and just using very simplistic way. However, if you would like to just make some UI, UX aspects on a little bit different level, we can just use some additional steps. So in that case, you can see that it's the one actually button which is consisting of 3 elements. So here is the actual button which gives you the ability to make some interaction, to make some action here. However, we also have the additional icon, which is on the middle, I can say, layer. And we also have the very bottom shape, which gives you the sense of having some kind of shadow. So if you put all the layers, so the first shape, which is on the bottom, the second, which is in the middle, which is the icon in that case, and the third one, which is the actual button, with some different shapes, you can create some, I can say, 3D effects of the buttons with shapes, with shadows, sorry, and the different colors on the backgrounds. So
And I
here is
also
the
like
first.
I just say that the map, and I've seen Microsoft use a couple of these as well, where it's a 2D image, but it's the image itself is shaped to be 3D, so it provides uh, a depth to it without actually looking like bad 3D or anything else.
Yeah, exactly. And it's actually the shape map. And in terms of how the report may look like, I would say that from the native visuals, the shape map is one of the most attractive and eye-catching one. And the first time when I saw the native shape map used in a very compelling, very attractive way was used from the Miguel, from the Microsoft, when he preparing the report from the Gartner, some type of conference. If I'm not, please correct me if I'm wrong. However, he made it in a very, very compelling way, so it was very inspirational. And in the moment, I wanted to implement and incorporate such map in my own report for the challenge. I took a little bit different approach. So if we are talking about this kind of shape, what is important here is the fact that it's actually some kind of the globe effect. However, in moment you slicer over some specific region, for example, the map itself is changeable in terms of the shape. So it's more like the round when it's not selected, and the types of specific regions or continents, for example, it's rounded. But as soon as you make some interactions, for example, to the different, to the specific continents, it's more like the rectangle shape of the map. So it's not as easy as it may look like if we are not working with this map, and it takes some steps to make it more appealing. So Miguel has the one approach. I took different approach when I wanted to incorporate some different shapes around the globe, as you can see here. So we have some kind of rings, some kind of lines, which imitate the look of the globe for this map. So there has to be implemented some kind of workarounds, because if I would leave the globe effect with these all rings and shapes continuously, so if we then slicer over for example, specific continents, we don't want to see the globe shapes, meaning the rings and all the lines. So there has to be applied some DAX workarounds with transparent color for different shapes, that in moment that you slicer, filter different geographical areas like the given country or given continents, it automatically changes it makes invisible all the shapes which are related with the globe effect, and make visible the rounded rectangle, which is more suitable for that look of the map. And for example, if you can use some kind of country, you can see the same effect. So all the shapes disappear at the moment we selecting different country, and we can see then the rectangle shape, which is visible and makes the nice interactive feeling of the 3D map. With additional legend, which in that case is external, because this native shape map has some built-in internal legend, but it's only visible from the from the field, from the formatting pane within the Power BI, and it would not be visible for any end user of the report. So I created the additional external legend which corresponds to the built-in shape map legend and corresponds in terms of value, gives you the information about the maximum, the center, and the minimum. So you can see why given regions are in the lighter colors and in a bluish or the most bluish one. Any questions here, Reed, or we can go to the to another technique.
Have to come off mute just to make sure. So I just no questions, but lots of good comments on just the quality of this, and people are really enjoying all of the design tips and tricks and practices. So really cool stuff, and I think earlier as well, Mark mentioned just he really likes your navigation on the sides, the little buttons that let you kind of switch between pages and everything. So nice implementations in those as well. I'm definitely taking some mental notes of like, okay, so if that's a button I could design similar to that if I ever needed to do certain navigations. So
great to hear that.
yeah.
Thanks for all the comments. So if we can go further, we can have the drill through mode. And one quick tip here is just to, we actually have the two different ways of setting the drill through. So the most standard way methods of using the drill through mode is just hovering over, right clicking the specific, for example, data points on the timeline and using the drill through and going to the different sections which meant to be your drill through page. However, we can also have the different way, which is a little bit more user friendly, and it's actually using another buttons with the drill through mode. It's very easy to set up in current versions of Power BI. We can have the action, we can just use the type instead of bookmark, we can use the drill through and actually use the destinations, which is very simple, very effective way. And the only thing we would like to implement within our drill through buttons would be some effects in the style section, because what we can see now is the stage which is it's called disabled. So now we don't have filtered any type of data points, any type of data. So the drill through is not available at the moment. It's a little bit grayish, not as much visible as it could be. But as soon as you, for example, would like to analyze a little bit better, a little bit more deeper, some specific context. So for example, if I switch a given month that I would like to dive in more and see specific about this specific data periods, we can see that this button actually change the look, and now it appears like it's active. So it gives me or the end user the information that we can just actively go to the different page. So the most important part here is just to suitably format all the crucial steps, all the crucial modes, which is the disable mode, which was the previous one, and the default mode, which is actually now when some data point is selected. And now we can smoothly go to the different section. We can see only the data for the 6 specific videos for that specific month. So basically what is recommended to just using different additional drill through buttons to make a little bit better user experience. All right.
Just commenting on a couple of things on the channel. People are, and I do want to give you a nod as well. So we had somebody was just mentioning field parameters would also be some great things in integrations related to this. And you actually did submit, by the way, a challenge, and we're one of the top, we're one of the contenders that were in the challenge that I ran earlier this year. But those are things that I think paired with a lot of the really interesting stuff that you've shown here. You use it pretty regularly to change the axes. The calculations, and I think honestly you probably at least shown 5 or 6 examples where I'm guessing you have used field parameters in some of these reports already.
Yeah, I have a lot of examples of using field parameters in our presentations in a little bit further steps. So if it would be convenient to everyone, I would like to present them a little bit in the next, for example, 10, 15 minutes, because I have some examples. So speaking very shortly about the general design from my perspective, using the specific types of fonts is also relevant, because as we can see, we have the different types of fonts, and they have the specific types and characteristics. And we would like to achieve, for example, is the situation when having specific numbers in a default mode, which means in that case are not bold, or if we bold some specific numbers, we would like to see them perfectly aligned vertically. So in that case, we can see that, for example, DIN matched that requirements perfectly. We can see that consolas also, the Calibri also is all right in that case, and the Arial. But Sego, however it calls, we can see that in the moment we bold the font, it's a little bit wider than the one which are not bold. So in case of, for example, presenting the financial data in tables, the matrix, it could be less effective to use such type of font, comparing to, for example, to DIN, which would be perfectly aligned on the subtotals and the most deeper level of hierarchies. So it's something that I try to pay attention which font I'm using in reports. So for values, DIN, for example, would be quite effective choice. And on the other hand, for all the text boxes and additional informations, we could use some kind of additional different fonts like Sego, for example, or any other. However, in my case, when I'm preparing reports in the English version, I prefer the DIN to both displaying the values and the text. So it's just worth to have it in the back of our minds. In terms of the font size and the general look of given text box, etc., I also recommend to use the bold and default state of different texts in a very contextual way. So I would recommend to give bolded text for the most crucial part of the titles. Like this is the bolded text for the metric itself. So if we are looking at the EBITDA, it's bolded. And here is another example when it's just the comparison between having bolded only the specific sections and having bolded all the titles, which in that case brings a little bit too much noise. So my recent way to go is just to pay more attention which font, which text and titles are bolded and which are not bolded in the default state, taking into consideration that having all this stuff, all these dynamic possibilities in our up-to-date reports, like the changing currency, changing measures, changing x-axis breakdown with details, we have so much different options which are dynamic that it requires giving the end user additional information about the choices. So it indicates and impacts on the length of given text and titles. So that's why bolded all the words within the titles, it's not the best way. So I think it's good to only make bold on a most crucial part of the titles. Here we have the KPI cards, which are built in the native smart narratives. So of course we can use additional different custom visuals, which allows to create the very beautiful and effective cards. However, if you would like to use some native visuals from the Power BI, we can use, like presented here, the native smart narratives or the standard card. So here is the example of the standard card within the Power BI, and here is the sample use of smart narratives. And here is the very basic breakdown of the smart narratives. So here we have the very fixed text. Within the smart narratives, we can just press the enter. We can put the value for the, in that case, budget value. We can put the fixed text with the versus, and we can apply a dynamic measure with which retrieves the actuals. And here we have two additional measures with the variance, and the very crucial step here is having two measures independent, separate, because at that moment we have no possibility to conditional format colors within the text, the smart narratives for one specific text. So here is the trick that you apply two different measures, one which you can see here with the which is unavailable at that moment. It's the negative variance, and here is the positive variance. So in moment when you filter some, for example, given a data period when the variance is positive, so that particular measure will be visible, and it is always meant to be green. However, if you, for example, choose the one specific data points which gives you the negative variance, so that measure will be invisible because there will be blank, and the second one, which is the negative, will be visible, and it's set up to be always red. So you give that impressions that you have the formatted, conditionally formatted measures, the variances. However, it's more like the trick with having double measures. Here's the breakdown. I wouldn't like to go deeper into that because we have plenty of another very interesting topics, but it's only the idea that I would like to present here, that in smart narratives we can just apply two different measures, one for positive variance and one for negative, and depending on the variance itself in the specific filter context, one will be visible and the other will be blank, which is invisible, and vice versa. So it gives the very interesting look that you have either red or green KPI cards with indications. And of course, and that's it, because there is additional shape here as the different shape, which gives you another indicator, green or red, depending on the variance, but it's an additional point, and it's more like the background of this in smart narratives, which is the basic shape with additional shades, shadow, and this shadow is implemented conditional formatting, which if the variance is positive, make the green shade in the upper section of that shape, and if it's a negative, it gives you the red one, and it holistically gives you such appealing KPI cards.
Definitely, I like the idea of a lot of those cards that have additional values like that. I think similarly that conversation that I constantly have with these is the performance. You know, like if you end up having 5 of these, but each 5 has 4 visuals, then that's 5 times 4 of unique objects in the page. And I found that actually, honestly, like well, there are some of the aftermarket ones. I know the card with states is something I use from SQL BI pretty regularly because it at least has a lot more, and it essentially has small multiples or a trellis ability, so you can show a lot of measures in one visual, and it's free. But I've used NUp a couple times to do this similarly. So I had Daniel help me build out one that has like a mini chart to show a trend plus actual and a whole bunch of different comparison values. So those bespoke visual creators are often very good to get results like this, but then reduce the number of unique containers on the page to get very pretty results, but still adhering to at least less unique visuals on screen.
Yeah, definitely agree. And I think you pointed out a very crucial factor, which is the report performance. And if we have the more shapes and visuals, it's of course impacts performance. So with small narratives or the visuals you already mentioned, which I didn't use so far, but I believe it's great if you recommend it. It's the great thing is that it's actually the only one element. It's only the one smart narratives which gives you the ability to express, for example, one metric, second, third, and fourth. So it's just the performance-friendly way of presenting the data. And the second very important feature here is just the possibility to aligning different sections of the KPI cards in an effective way, because if you would have 5 different shapes with different possible length of variance and length of values, it would be very difficult or even impossible to align that perfectly to the center, for example, in given scenarios. So smart narratives handle that requirements very well from my perspective.
Exactly.
Here we have the basic breakdown of the tables, because I personally am the big fan of tables, and I treat them as the very effective way of visualizing data. If you, for example, would use custom visuals which are provided by different companies, I would say they are highly effective. They give you the plenty of possibilities to use the waterfall, the vertical waterfalls, for example. It's very meaningful and very reasonable way to presenting data. However, we can perfectly know that tables and matrix within the Power BI are to some extent limited. So my point here is just to make as much, to take as much value features from the native tables and metrics as we can. And there are some specific steps that we can apply to the tables that we can see, for example, here, which is completely unformatted sample of the data. And here is the second one, which is after applying some very specific contextual steps to the tables. Of course, it's the dark dimmed report, which obviously will be look a little bit different than in the light mode. But the point here is just we can apply specific steps and adjustments to change the visual look of the tables and make them a little bit visually appealing. So some things that we can consider in terms of our data is on the top of that, making some very visible title, which is of course crucial. We can implement some additional conditional formatting when it's needed and it's required. So in that case, for example, if something indicates the positive variances or values metrics, however it calls, we can apply, for example, greens or reds in different contexts. We can highlight different items if you would like to. We can put bars. And the one thing I would like to point out here now is the fact that I personally like to put bars if I can, because it requires some additional report space. However, I would like to see the bars for different metrics as the separate column and not put the bars within the same column with the metrics. So as you can see here, when you have the different metrics related with the call center and the contacts between clients and agents, you can see that the actual value is here, but you can implement the scale, the data bars as the separate column. And it's my personal way to go in terms of visualizing data within the tables. And one crucial step here is just to make the additional format adjustments to the one column which is with data bars. And applying 3 semicolons gives you the very simple and effective way to get rid of all the values. We can of course apply the feature which is apply only data bars, but however there is the second thing with the subtotals and totals. And if we have the duplicated columns with the given metrics and apply as the separate column with data bars and apply 3 semicolons, we just get the smooth effect of having no values even on the subtotal or total level. So it's recommended from my perspective. And the additional way of presenting data bars is the thing that if I would present different metrics completely unrelated, I would like to use different colors for each data bars for different metrics. And if we have some different objects or charts on the side which would represent the same metric as here, so I would implement the same color in the table as on, for example, the bar chart on the column chart, if I would be presenting the same metric on a different visual. Here is the second example, this time in a lighter theme fashion, and here is the breakdown of the cost by business line and the type of cost as an example. And here is unformatted table, and here is the table where you can see the much more context applied to the table. So we have the previous year. The previous year is a little bit gray out. We have the actuals with the scale, which are much more visible because of the darker colors. And what's more important, we have the variances, both absolute and relative variance, which gives you the context. Because looking at this table, we can see, all right, we have the actuals like here, we have some structures, but it doesn't give you the visual feeling of what actually the business lines, as an example, or different cost categories are related with the higher values and what is correspond, for example, to the previous year. So by adding additional data bars, additional context, by showing the variances, we can display the same data like here, but in a more effective way, which gives you just the more information. And on the top of that, you can also use some formatting adjustments, like increasing the inner padding, which is the distance between different rows. And from my perspective, in many cases, it makes our tables a little bit better in terms of look if we just increase the inner padding. So these are all the small things. And for example, here in the percentages, we have the two digits after the colon, and here we have the only, and in that case, we haven't any other numbers, just the whole percentage. It could be only, it could be also the one place, for example, but it depends on the context. And here are the whole features, but it's actually, as previously mentioned, one thing I would like to mention also is the fact that we have the subtotals with different colors to make some distinguish. Yeah, I meant previously about the decimals, the numbers of decimals. It was also the crucial, because if it's not necessary, we just can limit them. And is also the nice feature to sometimes use the additional blanks metrics between given sections within the tables to make the look of the line between the sections. For example, we have the previous year, we have the actuals, then we have the blank value, which is very thin, and it's applied with the gray color in that case, and it makes some distinguish between actuals and the whole section with the variances. So applying some blank metrics within the table, it's a good way to distinguish some sections. Another great way to make our tables and metrics a little bit better is to using borders for our, for example, totals in terms of tables, and for example, to distinguish the column headers bar. And it's not so obvious, because if we go to the visualization pane and we have the border section, it's by default turned to all, and as it appears, we have some different possibilities, and we can, for example, go to the column header option or to the total, and we have completely different 4 elements that we can apply. So basically, from the very long time, I was only limited by the section called all, and only adjust the borders here, like the top, bottom, left, right, which gives the impression of applying border for the whole table. However, if we just switch the border to the section column header, for example, or the total, we give the additional control over specific regions of the table. So in that case, for the totals and for the column headers, and we can just highlight specific sections, and it's just a nice feature. One thing about the tables is also to keep in mind that if we are willing to put the data bars, it's very crucial to turn off the text wrapping, because if that options for values or for the header rows is available, we can just see the changeable width of the height of our data bars. So it's just crucial to make sure that we turn off the text wrapping. In terms of the field parameters, here's a very quick hint about the date granularity, which is also related with the saving some space on our report page. Because typically we use names for data granularities like the years, quarters, months, weeks, days, like the whole name. However, this technique calls for using in specific context, of course. If it's required, if it's needed, it's just the interesting feature that we can apply. So basically, if we set up the parameter with the different day granularities, with the different date granularities, like day, week, month, quarter, and year, it is applied as the field parameter. So basically, I would use some different names of the date granularities as the first section. So it's the day, week, month, quarter, year. However, if you would like to use the shorter names like presented here, we can add additional column, calculated column. So of course we can use in a first step such names. We can use it here. However, if there are many scenarios, many places in our reports when we would like to also see the full names in our field parameters, so we would like to choose that kind of names, we always have another possibility to make the shorter names by creating additional calculated columns in the table, which is constructed with our date parameter and with the basic switch parameter, which returns the order number of the field parameters, because each position within our field parameter gets some number of orders. So the day is 0, the week is 1, etc. So if we retrieve with switch statement the given orders for given fields with parameter fields, we can just switch and retrieve different names. In that case, like here. So finally, if we apply what you can see here, the slicer with the granularity selection, you can just put not the basic field parameter with that name, but the already calculated column with the shorter names. So it gives you the shorter names and the nice feeling in terms of user experience, because you perfectly know what does the specific letters mean, and it saves you a lot of space for completely different slicers or visuals.
So I want to mention something on this too, is I don't promote too many of his videos, but the you know, Boz for how to Power BI, whose like channels exploded in the last year. He just did one a couple days ago that automatically changes the axis from date to month to quarter to year based on how many unique fields there are. So we basically had a field parameter, created a bridge table between date and the field parameter to auto filter. But essentially, if he has a date slider that is less than a month, it automatically shows date. As soon as it shows 2 or more months, it goes to the month level. I think it's after, and you can specify the logic. After about 15 months, it goes to quarter. And you know, so instead of having to change it, like okay, you know what, like I'm like props to that. That's a really slick implementation. So it's similar to what you're showing here. And like I've done this before. I had yet to see or even think about the fact of making the axis actually just change by default, just based off of your date window that you're selecting from another slicer. So you essentially don't have to pick the axis level anymore. It just does it for you. But I'm loving field parameters just because they're so versatile, especially when you can key that sort order column that comes with it. There's besides just the order, there's a lot of clever ways to use that in a relationship to auto filter basically and change. So I have a few videos coming out about that as well, but I love people who continue to take what we're doing, like in examples like this, but just keep evolving it and finding new ways to utilize field parameters. They're such a versatile tool.
Exactly. And I haven't seen yet the content.
When we finish up, I'll drop you a link. It's really cool. So
yeah,
I recommend watching
that. Yeah, sounds great. I'm sure it's brilliant. All right, the next thing is the dynamic labels, and here what I would like to show you is the switching between labels on and off, and it's pretty much in terms, at least in that particular chart, it's very simple, because what we would like to achieve is just the additional slicer which gives you the ability to put the labels on or off depending on the context. So for example, if you have the line chart which is displaying the long-term trends, in some cases maybe you would like to switch the labels off. So it would be nice to, in specific context, have the ability to show the font, the labels, or just turning them on. So in a moment, I would like to see how we can easily implement on-off switch. And on the second hand, recently I've also, but it's very initial step, and I would like to dive deeper into that solution, is the ability to use to change the label density within our categorical type of x-axis, because x-axis, because in terms of x-axis categorical timeline, we have only possibility to either turn our labels off completely or turn them and show 100% of data labels visible. So I was trying to achieve the effect that, for example, every other labels appears on a given month and every other is invisible. So here is, as you can see here, the end effect of such function. And without diving more into the specific DAX formulas, because I'm sure I will present more details about it, but the idea in terms of switching labels on off, which is the more simplistic approach here for the line chart, is just to make a color either transparent or some given color like blue in that case, depending on the slicer selection. So we have the disconnected table with the switch function, and in the moment we just turn labels on, we just using the hex code for the given color in terms of in that case it's blue, and if we turn the slicer selection to the option off, every label becomes transparent, so it's invisible. So it's the very simple trick, I can say. Here is the more complex trick, which gives you the ability to hide every other label. And in that case, the idea was just to check if the number or ID of given month, in that case, it could be also related with different granularities, but it's more simplistic approach only to the months. So it checks its, for example, in the case of December, for example, it's the ID 12 because it's the 12th month of the year, and I can check if by dividing by number 2, which gives me the label density of 50%. So by dividing 12 by 2, I check either the result of that procedure is either the whole number or not the whole number. So for each month which returns the whole number after dividing by 2, it gives you the label. And for every month which not return the whole number, which is in that case, for example, the January, March, May, etc., by dividing by 2 will not give you the whole number. So it's the transparent color implemented to every other column on a timeline. So it's a trick how to trigger either different label density than default 100%. And I'm sure if we would upgrade that formula, we can also have the control to switch, for example, different data densities, like not only the 50%, but for example, 75, 15, or whatever we would like to choose. I think that's perfectly possible to implement. In terms of x-axis type, very basic hint, but I would like to highlight the fact that we have the continuous type of x-axis and the categorical type of x-axis. And one thing here is just to make conscious choice about what x-axis type you would like to choose when presenting given data. Because from my perspective, using the continuous type, like we can see on the upper chart, is very good if we have the more prolonged, more wider timelines with more, for example, years of data, etc. However, if we present data on a specific weeks, days basis, it's quite effective to use categorical x-axis type, like you can see here. So each day of month with the specific given numbers, or if each month is separated by given columns, everything is visible. So it's a nice thing just to consider which type of x-axis we would like to pick for our data, or either operational or financial. In many cases, using categorical is a better way, because from one hand, it's not so space saving in terms of the space in the report, because it does not concatenate different granularities, but it gives you the separate column for each data points. However, in many cases, it gives you a little bit more visible and transparent way of visualizing given data point.
Let's pick, I would say, just for sake of time as well, let's go through one more cool example, and then we'll probably start wrapping up here, just so we don't go too far past the hour.
Yeah, sure. So if you could
Perfect.
help me with making decision, what would you like
Yeah,
to show
absolutely.
on a final stage? Because I have plenty of options here. So
Hmm.
let's pick one. Here's the simple report makeover when we just showing the some pretty much bad views, and we can see what was the upgraded. How to can see how we can apply the unification of y-axis, because sometimes it's great to have the multiple visuals on one page and to make y-axis unified across all the visuals, so you can see the scale between different metrics. Here is the field parameters. I can sum up that very quickly, because we have the category breakdown with the waterfalls, which is implemented on x-axis and gives you the possibility to, for example, in that case, presenting financial data on the more
Hmm.
general look or the more details. So the revenues could be breakdown and the expenses could be breakdown to departmental more detailed categories, for example. So one switch with the field parameters and you can go from the top view to the bottom view very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. That's actually like that. Pretty much that's the solution that I think I implemented a little bit back, where you can change the axis, the breakdown, and then the metric. So I already
Exactly.
have all the videos on that, but the first one would be really good, I think. Just general best practices and everything on report cleanup.
The first one meaning,
Yeah, the very
do
first
you
one.
mean the first meaning the structure of, and you
No,
can
no.
see
So
that.
the first thing you spoke about, turning a bad report to a good report.
Yeah, sure.
Hmm.
This one, because we have
Yep.
the plenty more later on, but I assume that we would like to limit to that one, correct? Because
Yes, just
I
for
didn't
sake
show
of
you all
time.
the, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So here we have the basic, the exemplary financial report with the plenty of financial metrics presented. And here it's just the sample presentations of some bad practice. So in that case, we can see that we have the some numbers, like the last period we have the metrics but without additional context, so we actually don't know if this number is better than we expected, if it's better than previous year, for example. So there is the bad news here, the bad practice here is just having no context for the metrics. Then we have no labels on our chart. So sometimes it's valid to having no data labels, because, for example, if you have the very long-term trends on a line charts, for example, we can switch them off or just decrease the density of data labels. However, in that case, I would prefer to see the data labels. So in that exemplary case, it's just the bad practice just to having no data labels. And I would generally say that I'm more into having data labels and not having y-axis scale, and it's more important in that case from my perspective, like having the y-axis scale visible and having no data labels visible. So data labels from my perspective are more important in most cases. Of course, there are some exceptions. In that case, we have also the unclear y-axis scale, because we don't actually know where it started. We don't know if it's 0 at the bottom or maybe not. And here we can see that we have the 40 valued, here is the 20, and here of 100%, it's not beginning on the 0. So it's unclear. We have the inadequate distance between objects. So for example, there is this object which gives you the title for that particular chart is far more closer to that visual comparing to that. So it wouldn't give you the information what are you looking at if you are looking at that particular chart, because I would assume that this title would be some additional information related to that chart, or it's even the title itself. So from my perspective, it should be well aligned and it should be in a very specific distance between charts and visuals. We have the unnecessary text, meaning that in most cases we don't require and need the name of the data granularity, because it's date, of course, but it's self-explanatory. Sometimes you would like to see the name of the metrics on y-axis scale, but in most cases it's it's not relevant because we have that type of information in the titles. We have lack of additional data context, meaning no reference lines like the average is max. Sometimes it's all right, but sometimes we would like to see the additional context. And we have the bad practice in that case in terms of the color of lines, because I personally pay great attention to the colors we use on our reports, and red, yellow, and green from my perspective, but also from perspective of many people and general of IBCS standards, which I'm a huge advocate also, to use that colors only in very specific contexts, for example, to highlighting variances. And in that case, the green color or yellow color was used without any additional context in a not meaningful way, just for the sake of the color itself. So from my perspective, in that case would be some kind of the bad practice. And on the second slide, you can see some highlighted corrected elements on that particular report page. So in that case, we added some context. So we know what was the previous year metric for the given metric. We would like to know what was the last period in that case, in the filter context, what was the value for the last period, and what was the difference, just to put additional information. We have the added additional context, which are the reference lines and the target. So we have the implemented such box as a value parameter with some kind of target we would like to achieve. And it compares with the actual values, which are the actuals, and it gives you, for example, the green, red, or yellow color, depending, or if you are the upper, your target lower, or equal to target. So it's kind of the additional context we'd like to put on our metrics, just to make the very quick informations if you are below or above our targets or different metrics. We have also the additional x-axis lines here, which represents the previous year, the current. It's not always necessary. However, in that way, I would like to show some different ways of presenting and adding some context. We have the legend, the explanation to just let end user know what are you looking at, what is the legend and the meaning of different colors. We have of course, put data labels, and the data density is very strategic here, because we don't have all data labels, but only the specific ones. And we have highlighted only the previous and only the last point. And we have the proper structure alignment in general. So we know that every objects, every backgrounds, every line charts are as much aligned as possible with adequate space between them, just to make sure that if we are, for example, reading this title, we perfectly know that it's correspond to that visual. We have also the excluded y-axis and x-axis titles. So every element which is unnecessary and produce noise is just excluded from this report page. And that's pretty much all of it in terms of this small report makeover.
Excellent. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good points on both the axis, the calling out the labels. I know that I've had Kane Schneider on to talk about how to use calculation groups to do a lot of this stuff as well, which really so many different ways to draw attention to elements that you care about, drawing attention away from those. Also, even things such as the header icons and everything else. Like Miguel Myers has talked about this for years. Like the less is more. You want as few things as possible on a page to convey the story, to allow some business decision to be made. So I'm very much an advocate for minimalism in report design and everything else. It keeps things clean and unclustered. But this has been fantastic. We've seen a lot of different things today. I've seen a good healthy amount. I think our peak was about 50 people that were streaming for this one, so a pretty popular topic for sure. And people have been really, really enjoying the topics overall. I got a message up here from Visual Q. Just it's nice to be able to hear from a Polish trainer, considering they're tuning in from Poland as well. So
very nice to hear that. Very nice.
Yeah,
Cheers.
yeah, absolutely. Let me go ahead and switch back to us now. Gustaw, I want to thank you a lot for coming on today. This has been fantastic, and I definitely learned a lot, and it's nice to just, like I said, see someone else who spends as much time and care on design and aesthetics and everything else, and seeing some of the art of possible. I know I'm certainly going to leave with a few extra tricks for some navigation buttons and everything else, so this will be really, really cool. Um, Rekka, yeah, one last question that I'll put up, and we were talking about this kind of throughout the stream as well, but generally speaking, there's a fine balance between number of objects on the page and design. So when you can combine things using small multiples, maybe custom visuals that let you show multiple values on a card, things like that, it will make your page faster because the more objects you have, the slower it will be. And I think Gustaw's shown some good examples of not only presenting aesthetics, but also making sure that we can keep a minimal amount of unique objects on the page. And I don't know if you had anything else you'd like to add as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. And I would generally say that spreading some visuals across different pages would be more effective in terms of performance, because if you put all the visuals on the one
Oh,
page,
that's what it was, yeah.
it would impact much more report performance comparing to the adding different page. However, in terms of using the bookmarks and hiding different objects, it would also impact the report performance, sometimes in a good way if we just hide different visuals. However, I would generally say that it's a very interesting question. I would like to make some additional research about this, because if we compare one page with multiple visuals and two pages, I would be very curious how it would impact performance from
Yep.
from the reason of having more report pages, for example. So
I
that's very
think
interesting
I think
question.
this might have been in context of your layering, where you had multiple pages worth of visuals on a single page. My just one follow-up to that is, if that's what she's referring to, visuals that are hidden for the most part don't have a performance cost. They don't, the container doesn't load and the data doesn't calculate. So I've seen like years ago there used to be it was Matt Allington. Somebody had a blog where they actually had a button to load certain visuals to make the page load faster, just because it doesn't query them yet. So there is complexity in the selection pane and complexity in having to create the bookmarks if you have more visuals on the page. But the only thing that will render and add to performance for the page to load is what is visible at the time. So if you have 35 objects, that's going to be what's calculated in terms of the performance. If you hide those 35 and show another 20, those are the only things that are basically going to load with the page. So performance-wise for the user, I don't think they're really like, there's not a downside of performance to layering them. There is a downside of complexity of the bookmarks have to be more carefully curated because you have to make sure to select the right groups in your selection pane. And then there is just a lot of layering going on in terms of just, you have to accurately manage that. But otherwise, performance-wise, I think if it's properly built, I wouldn't imagine 3 pages layered on each other with bookmarks in one page versus 3 separate pages in a page navigation. From a user performance perspective of load time, I think there would be very little difference if they were identical, other than simply showing and hiding visuals on one page versus navigating to a new page.
Yeah, all clear.
Perfect, though. I think there's no other good, or there's no other questions. I just continued comments of people who really like uh, all the stuff that's been done today. So I think we'll use that to wrap up. I'll give you the rest of your Friday evening back, Gustav. Wish you a good weekend, and then everyone onto the channel as well. Thank you again for joining for this. This has been fantastic, and I'm sure I'll have you back on some point to go over some other really cool stuff related to the design and the modeling ecosystem. So thanks so much again for coming on today.
Yeah, Reed, thank you very much for having me again. And it was a very fantastic experience to have a live stream today. So thank you very much again for invitation
Absolutely.
and for all the presence of our phenomenal audience. So cheers and best regards to everyone who's watching right now, and for everyone who will be watching in the next days or weeks, etc. So thank you very much for today and have a great day.
Perfect. All right. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.